Christina, I'm so glad we're doing this. We're excited to share your story. We just want you to know that before.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Christina, welcome. We are so glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and excited to share what the Lord's done in my life for the last 3 decades.
So what's happening in your life today?
Well, I'm on a national book tour. The book, my memoir, Cinder Girl, releases March 5th. And it's been a whirlwind. I mean, I'll be on the Today Show in a couple weeks and several other national television shows. And I mean, I can't even count how many radio shows. It's just been quite a whirlwind, but I'm very excited.
So how did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams that this would be your reality right now in this month?
Yes, actually, I knew the Lord was bringing me here when I was homeless living in my car.
Really?
Yep. So I have been planning and writing out my dreams and my goals and the tasks that I've been given since I was 18. And I didn't know how it was going to get done. And I didn't know how long I was going to have to wait. But just like Joseph, the Lord had to test my character. And here we are. And, it's been a journey. It's been painful. It's been lonely. It's been hard. It's been joyous. It's been filled with friendship. It's been full. It's been very full. And I'm excited to see, the next 60 days what happens after the book comes out and everyone gets to hear my story. And it's just been an exciting journey for sure.
So take us back a little bit to your childhood and give us a picture of what it was like for you growing up.
Growing up was a dark place in my life. My mother and my father were married for 15 years and they had 8 kids. Very early on, I knew my mother didn't like me. And what I've been told is the reason is because I look like her. All of my other siblings are dark hair, dark skin, dark eyes, like my skinny Italian father. And then there's me, and I'm just blue-eyed, blonde-haired girl. Totally not. It's like if you look at old family photos, I stick out like such a sore thumb. And my mother was fair-skinned and green eyes, and I looked the most like her. And so she treated me very differently since I can remember, and it just progressed and progressed and progressed as the abuse and the isolation went on. And my father got put in jail, and he was no longer there to protect me from her. It got exponentially worse to the point where I didn't have a name. I wasn't considered human at times. She really isolated me from the family unit, and it was hard. It was a very dark childhood. Very painful, very confusing. I didn't understand why my mother, who I loved so much, even though she did some horrible things to me, I wanted her love so much. I couldn't understand why she didn't want me or love me. And so, it was a hard time. But the Lord came and he revealed his grace and his love for me in a very divine way and preserved my heart. So I'm very thankful.
So tell us about that. What does that mean when you say the Lord came? Tell us what that looked like.
Yeah, so most of my time as a child, I spent in the laundry room or doing chores. And the laundry room behind the house was attached to the house, so it was almost like a back porch. And on one of these occasions, I had just got done being raped. And I went into the laundry room to do laundry, and I was almost hollow at that point. I was just I remember just being very hollow and numb, no emotion, just going through life as a chore. And I did not want to live. I did not want to exist. And I was doing laundry, and I was so small that I was up on top of the washer pulling out clothes, bending over so my feet were hanging off the ground. And I just all of a sudden felt this presence of peace, something that was very unique for me. So I remember it exactly. I don't ever remember feeling peace, growing up. And so when this peace overcame me, startled me almost to fear. And then I just remember love coming next after the piece, like this rush of love. And I was so confused. And I knew it was Jesus. I mean, I was 10 years old and I knew. I was like, that's Jesus. I don't know how, but it's like that in that moment, he took my very wounded and hurting heart and he took it out of my chest and he put it inside of a glass case and he preserved my heart. And even though the abuse continued for years and years and years, my heart was no longer hollow. I just remember clinging to the moment of peace and love and hope that he had given me in that moment for years after that. So it was very a special moment that the Lord gave me, for sure, as a kid.
So as you've processed this, what do you make of being singled out like that in the family?
It's
because
more normal than you
your
think.
your siblings didn't have the same growing up experience that you did?
I mean, they were still abused emotionally, psychologically, and physically, but not in the extent that I was. It was very different. I mean, they were definitely abused. I mean, my mother would use them to abuse me. So that in itself is traumatic. You know, I remember my mother would make them do things and their faces were just terrified, but they knew if they didn't do as she said, they would get beat, or they would, you know, whatever her punishment, whatever she decided to do that day to us. So they were definitely abused just as much as me, but not in the same way, if that makes sense. And it's not as unique as you think, having a child being soloed out by a parent. It's very common, very common. So yeah, I think my siblings still carry a lot of woundedness, you know, from our childhood. And I just pray that my book helps release some of that, for sure.
I actually just read an article, well, 2 articles on that the other day, about this concept of, or this phenomenon of a family singling out a person. And they actually, in this article, it was I don't know, Psychology Today, I don't know, it was something like that. And it was calling that person a scapegoat, and where that actual term came from, and then why that happens in a family, or the phenomenon that it does happen in a family. And actually a child can be singled out, and how harmful it is for that child. And that actually then the siblings follow suit until that child is completely ostracized. It is just a bizarre phenomenon to me of why this would happen, but it does.
All the time. It really does. And I think, you know, children follow their parents in this type of abuse because they want the same thing that I wanted, acceptance and love. So if abusing your sibling is going to get you acceptance and love, as a child, of course you're going to do that. What difference do you know? You don't. You just know that you want your mom or your dad to accept you, to favor you, to want you. So I think it's pretty simple to understand in the sense of why it happens. But what is most confusing is, you know, I think the adults who do this, you know, my mother obviously was very wounded. She was obviously very broken. And I think she grew up in an abusive home. Well, I know she grew up in an abusive home. And that's why my whole mission and part of my nonprofit and part of what I do on a daily basis as a soldier, as a woman, as a leader in any field that I'm working in, is to encourage people that, hey, you can heal from traumatic experiences. You can be whole again. You can give back to society everything that was taken from you. You do not have to be robbed blind, and you don't have to end up back in dysfunction and the cycle of poverty and abuse. And so, you know, I know for me, I have broken that line in my family. There will be no dysfunction and no poverty and no abuse in my home. And I've worked years and years and years to get there. And so I think you know, parents who have children who have unhealed traumas should really consider getting, you know, help and getting their childhood taken care of before they bring children into the world. And not to say you can't have children if you have trauma, but just to be aware of that maybe that's why you're having that disconnect with one of your kids, you know. So
yeah, it seems just from the quick description that you gave us, that your mom was working out a lot of her own self-hate through you, if she identified with you in that special way. So I know part of your story is that you at some point entered the foster care system. Can you tell us about that? Was that an experience you had with your siblings, or were you alone in that?
No, so the police started coming around my house at 9. Social workers and that whole system started coming around very early. But because of my mother and who she had an affair with and who she ended up dating and marrying, it came to nothing. And so for years and years and years, people would call the abuse hotline saying, hey, these kids are being abused, and nothing was ever done because, my mother was dating the lawyer for the sheriff's department. So my story with the foster care system is unique in that we should have been taken away several years before we were. I wasn't taken away until I was 16. I should have been taken away at 9. It would have spared me years of rape and torture, really. I mean, so when we were all taken away because one of my high school teachers called it in, and it was in a different county, so there's nothing that my mother or her husband at the time could do. They couldn't wipe it under the rug. It was a very incredible moment for me to be free, but then to be ripped from my siblings. We all got placed in different homes. And then after my mother, that was my junior year, and then after my mother did classes per the court system, she got custody back of all my siblings, but she stipulated in the court documents that she didn't want me. She wanted to step up parental rights over me. So my siblings went back to the dysfunction, and I stayed in a foster care home until I turned 18, my first year, my first semester of senior year, and then I left. I said bye.
So what was your foster family like?
Oh, they were amazing. I mean, it was my ROTC teacher in high school, and him and his wife were incredible people. They had children of their own, and that's really why I left eventually. It was very hard I didn't understand expectations, or I didn't understand, for instance, something simple. They had 2 daughters and 1 son, and one of their daughters, I would always borrow her clothes or her perfume. And I didn't understand space because I had grown up with so little that if we had a can of tuna, all 8 of us would share it. So I didn't quite get the this is mine and this is yours. So, as a teenager, I could understand why. Looking back, I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't have borrowed her clothes all the time without asking.
Mm-hmm.
But they were an incredible family, and they really did me a justice. And it was just very hard to acclimate. I was confused a lot of the time. I didn't understand the family unit. I felt like an outsider, essentially because I was, not because they tried to make me feel that way, but because, you're not prepared to take a traumatized child to a very healthy home with a stable marriage of 30 plus years with 3 kids. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot. And so when I could leave, I did, because I just felt like I was tearing up their family. So I just couldn't handle it. It was too hard. It was too hard for me. But they were a great, great family. They really were.
So that's interesting, because you have the pain of rejection from your mom not wanting you back from the foster care system, but then you have the pain of not really fitting into a functional family. And that's a really interesting play. That's a lot. It's a lot as a teenager to be taking in and to be bearing.
Oh, yeah. They called me Miss Stone Cold. I was I was 4 years of ROTC in high school, which is what saved my life. All of the discipline and the teams I was active in, and I was very athletic. I was captain of cross country, captain track and field. That's all I was good at. I was terrible in academics, but I was a darn good athlete. So, I think I just buried it in sports, and I buried it in all my accolades in ROTC. And, it didn't come out until my younger 20s when I really started trauma therapy, and I spent almost a decade in serious trauma therapy to handle out my junk. So I'm a functioning whole adult now. Praise Jesus. Praise the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I always, not that I wasn't functioning in my younger 20s or even in high school, I just didn't have emotion. So I wouldn't connect with people. There was like this wall, right? So you could get in, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
You were my friend, but not really, because I knew you would leave me eventually, so it's I was very isolated in the sense that my circle was very small, and it's still very small today, but in a healthy way. Not, when I was 21, rejecting everyone who wanted to befriend me out of fear.
So at 18, you're halfway through your senior year. Where do you go?
Ooh, couches. I was
Mm-hmm.
queen of couch surfing. I think I couch surfed on probably 6 or 7 of my battle buddies in ROTC, and their parents were so kind to me, and they'd help me get to school, and taught myself how to drive. Failed the driver's test 3 times, but I got it on the 4th try. And then finally got my license, I think 2 days after I graduated high school, and bought a car, and then lived in my car for over a year.
So as you think about kids who are emancipating out of the foster care system, it's the word they use, right?
It's the word they use. It's an absolute crisis and a sin, but.
So my husband and I worked when we were dating we lived at a group home for teenagers who were emancipating out of foster care.
Wow.
As kind of their last chance at learning some independent life skills, and also their last attempt at being in a family-like environment that was different. And so your story resonates with me, all the rejection of people because people are not safe and adults are not safe. But now as I'm a mom of teenagers, the thought of sending my child at 18 out into the world with no parachute, no backup plan, no support system. And this is a child who has grown up in, we've got our issues, but we're relatively healthy. We're relatively stable. And I mean, it would be a disaster because she's 18 and can do some things, but for kids who haven't had that modeling of what it is to live a healthy life, how do you think the system can do a better job by them as they grow and they turn 18 and become legal adults?
No 18-year-old is equipped to leave the home, whether a foster home or a whole family unit, a healthy whole family. You're 18 years old. You're dumber than a box of rocks. Like, let's be honest, right? By the grace of God, I've never done drugs. I never slept around. I never drank. Thank you. I don't know. I'm like a unicorn. I have no idea because everyone told me I was going to end up. These statistics are real. 60% of girls at 16 who are in the foster care system end up pregnant. 80% of foster care children end up in the prison system. 50% of boys will end up with felonies. 20,000 18-year-old children age out each year and become homeless every year. It's like, what can we do as a community, as a country? We can reform the foster care system in its entirety because it's an absolute injustice to our children and our future. I mean, how are we as a people, as Americans, going to different countries, which I am not against, and taking children in without providing for our children here? And because we offer them, emancipation, and we offer them these very semi-permanent opportunities, there's no wraparound services, there's no support, there's no stability, there's no relearning how to engage in conversation, or how to apply for a job, or how to write a resume, or how to even do your hair for an interview, how to apply for college. These kids don't know any of that. I know I had to do that all on my own, and it was a very painful road because I was a good girl who dealt with a bad hand, and I tried, and I still was homeless, sleeping in my car and taking showers at the beach access. not because I did anything wrong. And that's a lot of foster care kids. They didn't do anything wrong. They have no choice. They have no ability to get their head out from the quicksand that has suffocated them for their entire childhood. And I mean, I know my foundation in its infancy now is continuing for me to bring awareness and advocacy for reform, but in the long term have facilities, which I think our country should be doing, is have long-term facilities, 12 to 24 months, where these kids can come in with stipulations if they have a full-time job, which we will help them get, or full-time school, which we will also help them get. They can stay in these facilities with wraparound services, all the way from dermatology, to going to the dentist, to trauma therapy, and have a special facility for these kids who have children, so they can go to school and go to work, so daycare, and then 24-hour crisis centers, so these kids have somewhere to go. I think the biggest oversight in the foster care system today is no one's committed. It's such a fallacy to say, oh, there's a group home. Okay, well, everyone knows in that group home that there's a time limit, and after that time limit, then what do they have? What are you going to give them? A check for $500 or $1,000 and send them on their way? I mean, the answer to this crisis is forever family.
Mm-hmm.
It's for people to adopt these children and commit to them like a marriage. That is the answer. To reform foster care in its entirety, to turn it up on its head, so it's actually providing services for these children to be rehabilitated into society, to include full-time trauma therapy, and then make sure these 500,000 children in America get forever families. I don't know why that's so hard. There's plenty of people looking for children. But the reason it's so difficult is because these kids come with a stigma. They do come with issues that need to be worked out, and they do come with serious commitments that these adults need to make. And people can barely stay married. So of course, why would they take a traumatized child in? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's the sacrifice is too much, and it's an absolute sin. It is. Oh, I get so heated. I'm sorry.
We love passion. We love passion around here.
And I agree with you. Everything you're saying, I completely agree with you. The commitment element, I think, is so, I don't know. Let me start again. I think the commitment element is key, because if we think about that 18-year-old who is being dropped into the world with probably very, very few practical life skills, not to mention the emotional situation that they're in because of trauma, to have a family that is with them that says, we are going to be here for you to figure out school, for you to figure out your health, for you to figure out your relationships and dating, for you to figure out how to parent in maybe a year, maybe 10 years. That is something that is priceless. It's just priceless. And we interviewed Shannon Martin, who's an author who adopted a young man who was in jail, and he was already a parent. And I don't remember how old he was when they adopted him, but he was in the 18 to 20-year-old range. And I've heard more and more of people adopting kids who are in that 17 to 21-year-old range, where they legally maybe are independent, but they are so far from being able to be independent.
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't equipped after years of therapy, mind you, and never getting caught up into drugs, and never drinking, and never sleeping around, right? All of the things that sabotage a child. I still didn't manage to have healthy relationships till my mid-20s, right? And that was after years of being faithful in my walk with the Lord, and working full-time jobs, and minding my P's and Q's, and being in therapy. It still took a long time for me to emotionally be capable of connecting with another human being. And if you can't connect with somebody else, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever, you cannot have a healthy whole life. It's impossible. And so, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The only answer to the foster care crisis is complete reform of the foster care system in its entirety and forever families. And that, to me, is possible. I believe in the next 20 years that foster care can be completely reformed to where our children are giving back to society and not ending up on the welfare prison system. It's like this vicious cycle. It's like you're in foster care, then you're on welfare, then you're in prison. Then you have kids and they're in foster care, they're in welfare, then you're in prison. It's like this very sick cycle that we can break, but we have to do it together. It has to be a movement of all of us working together and going, hey, we should probably help these 500,000 children and 20,000 children that age out as adults, quote unquote, at 18 every year. You know,
yeah,
it takes all of us.
My husband works for a ministry that does transitional housing here in Denver, and they just opened a house this year that is specifically for young adults, so that 18 to 24-year-old range, people who are currently living on the streets in Denver. And the estimation is that half of those young adults have aged out of foster care.
Oh,
so
yeah.
But I will say, you mentioned drug use. The substance element is so intense because here are people who are traumatized, so they have mental health issues. They don't have access to medication, so they're self-medicating, numbing themselves essentially through drugs and alcohol and sex. I mean, all those are all tools you use in the self-numbing department. And so in order to provide them housing and kind of all those wraparound services that you're talking about, you have to peel away not just the trauma, but now all of the developed coping mechanisms, either relationally or behaviorally, that have developed over time in order to be able to get to those core issues. And it takes time. It just takes time, and it takes people's intense
sacrificial love.
Yes, that is what it takes. And, you know, this house only houses, I don't know, maybe 12 young adults max, with a staff of 4 to 6 people at any given time. And again, the staff live with the residents, trying to recreate this sense of family. And so I'm curious, as you say, we need to reform, how long do you think the foster care system should follow a young adult as they are transitioning in that period of time where they're no longer legally a child, and yet they're not capable really of being independent? What is your vision when you say it needs to be reformed?
My vision is that the foster care system shouldn't be a long-term answer, because it's not. It's the absolute disaster. What should be the foster care system's role, or DCF's role, is to place children in forever families, which means we need to regulate the laws so people are able to adopt easier. There's so many families. I can't tell you how many men and women have reached out to me over the years that I've been traveling the country and speaking, telling me their stories, how they tried to foster to adopt, and it was impossible because of laws or money or XYZ. I mean, that right there would be huge if we could change state and federal laws to allow easier adoptions. You know, I mean, that right there would be huge, because right now it is easier to adopt a child overseas than it is an American orphan. That to me is mind-boggling. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
In what regard? Can you give us an example of that?
So from what the stories that I've heard, these parents try to adopt, and there's too much red tape, there's too much paperwork, there's too much money, there's a time limit. I'm not well versed in the adoption area, other than all of the stories and people coming to me telling me, hey, part of your reform should be to make adoption easier for us, because they're going different places. So I'd have to get back to you to give you factual statistics. I just know as a whole, the stories that I've been getting over the years, how difficult it is to foster adopt.
I have heard, you know, as people have been giving specific change suggestions, that one of the changes that would be helpful is the ability for relief care, or what they call respite care, for parents who have foster kids. Because I know, for example, we have a family in our church that has had a number of foster kids in and out the last decade. And in order for me to watch those kids, for that foster mom to give her a break, I would need to go through a weekend training and pay $150. So she can't just drop off her biological kids and her foster kids with me, because I haven't been through that training. So that's like a specific example of what I've heard would be a helpful reform, those kinds of things. But I'm always curious about what specifically we can be advocating for as families who want the foster care system to be better. And so I'm open
I think another aspect for those of us on this train trying to really change the way things are for foster care children is mandatory trauma therapy. At the time they are taken out of the home, which by the way is very traumatized. I can't tell you how many trash bags I had. And I wasn't even in foster care at that point. I was just my biological mother throwing us from home to home. And I still had all the trash bags. So I think trauma therapy starting at the beginning until they're 18 or 21 or 24, whatever program they're in, I think is essential. Because if a child can get trauma therapy and deal with their junk before they get to high school, or even while in high school, they are less likely to turn to addiction in dysfunctional relationship and all the things that's easy to get caught up in, because they've actively been working on their pain. You know, I understand addiction. I really do, because I've been walking out my healing journey with never doing drugs, and it is painful. Sometimes it's so painful that I did not want to live, because it was like, this is painful. I get why people don't want to deal with their junk and have midlife crises. A midlife crisis purely is you never dealing with your junk and it coming out later, and your body's telling you don't have a choice anymore. You can't numb it. It's happening. That's a midlife crisis. And so, you know, I think trauma therapy is such a huge, one of my pillars in my nonprofit and something I talk about. And I think that even if that was just implemented, that would be huge for a child to relearn, redevelop, and heal and become whole by the time they're, you know, graduated high school.
So I'd like to go back a little bit to your own story. So you're in the car, and what happens from there? I mean, how do you even enter this space in your 20s where you start to, and you have the motivation to get healthy?
Well, the Lord didn't really give me a choice, because when I was homeless sitting in my car, I read my Bible every day. And I really got close with Jesus, and I could really hear his voice, and he started giving me these dreams, which I hated in the beginning. I was like, these are awful. And then I started to embrace them, and then I started dreaming myself. And I think, you know, it motivated me to want to get healthy and start therapy and start actively participating in my healing journey, because I just remember, even as a kid, never wanted to be like my mother. Never. I never, ever, ever wanted to be like her. And I talk about it in my book, how I just was resolved to be the antithesis. And so, yeah, I think my walk, my relationship with Jesus, and just, you know, how God made me as a person, it was time. I knew I was in a stable place. I had a stable job. I had finally gotten a roof over my own head, and, you know, the Lord helped me persevere through some hard times. And I was like, all right, let's start talking about my junk. And I have been for years now.
So you did get a job you got a job and you started working, and then you were able to secure housing?
Oh, I had a job all through high school and when I lived in my car. I have never been jobless, not ever. So that's not a luxury that people like me have. So yeah, I was working in high school, and I had 3 jobs at one point when I was homeless, and then went down to 2. And I saved up all the money I had to get my apartment. And then I had 2 full-time jobs for a few years. I was a maid and a bartender for a long, long time. And then I moved out to California, bartended out there before I got to for the Miss California pageant. won Miss California, and then started all the things I had been working towards even before, the nonprofit, the speaking, the advocacy, and my book, of course.
So how, I mean, where did the Miss California thing come in?
I was in Whole Foods and this pageant recruiter came up to me literally and said, "You should try out for Miss California." And I laughed. I was like, whew. I never went to prom. I had to work a double. Okay. Like, no,
right.
Like, I just assumed he was hitting on me. So I just took the card, was polite, and threw it in my handbag and, got my celery juice and walked out the door. But then I got home and I looked it up and I was like, wow, this is all right, Lord. Okay. I prayed about it for all of like a day. And then I was convinced this is what the Lord wanted me to do. So I did it. And that was that.
And most
that
people,
wasn't easy either.
Okay, we all know the pageant families, right? The pageant moms, the pageant people. I mean, this is not like something you just call up and jump into. This is something you train for years. So what in the world?
Yeah. So I can tell you when I was there by my lonesome and I would see the pageant moms, pageant grandmoms, and the pageant coaches, and they're like one girl surrounded by 3 different people, and then there's just me and I'm doing my makeup by myself. It's just the Lord. He has the humor about himself, obviously, to take a girl like me and make me Miss California. And don't get me wrong, I ended up hiring a makeup artist, and I did have a handful of really gracious women that assisted me through, but nothing like the typical pageant journey that most young women are on. But yeah, it was an experience, and it really allowed me to learn about myself. It was very empowering. It was very eye-opening. I learned how I wanted to be seen and how I wanted to be on stage in front of people like that. It kind of brings your self-awareness to like a different level. So it was a great learning experience. It was painful at times. I cried because I knew I was different, and I knew I didn't have any training, and I wasn't the prettiest, and I wasn't the smartest, and I wasn't the most well-versed, and I didn't have the best gowns by any means, and I did not know how to do a pageant walk. I still look at videos and I'm like, oh, bless your heart, Chris, you hot little mess, because there's a certain way to walk. Literally, there's like
right.
So I think I think it was the Lord just giving me a little, I got you, girl, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very gracious of him. And like I said, it was a learning experience for me, and one that I needed. I got to experience some things that I think a young woman should experience. So akin to getting all dolled up for prom, I guess.
Right.
So.
Is there a video we could link to of you getting crowned? I would love to see that.
I'll have to ask. I know there's tons of photos if you Google me, but let me reach out to my prior pageant director and see if she's got some video of that. Yeah. When they said my name, insta tears, like.
Oh, I would just love to see that moment. I would really love to see that moment. So I'm going to follow up with you on that. We're going to try and get that. Okay. So then, the military has played a really important part in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Can we talk about that? What role did it play for you, and where has it led you?
Okay. So the United States military is hands down, is the reason that I am who I am. Is the reason that I did not fall into all of the disasters that a foster care child ends up in. I did 4 years of junior ROTC in high school, and I had a captain, first sergeant, a master chief, a gunny, another captain, and these men were not going to allow me, Cadet Meredith, to end up all jacked up, not on their watch, right? So essentially, my 4 years of high school, even though I was in and out of home, I was being abused, I was a mess, I essentially had 5 fathers who I definitely looked up to as fathers. And I wanted to make them proud, and I wanted to get the medals, and I wanted to, stand at attention for as long as they wanted. And, you know, I just think that's another part of my advocacy is for foster children who are of age to be an ROTC. To make it mandatory for foster care children to enroll in ROTC, high school ROTC. It's the best thing that could ever happen to a foster care kid. Best thing. Not only do they get the team elements, the camaraderie, they get the fatherly or motherly elements, they get the expectations, right? Because if you tell a child they're no good, guess what? They're going to be no good. If you tell a child, hey, you can make first place in this, guess what? That child's going to make first place. So, you know, I think, you know, ROTC just played such a huge role. I can't advocate it enough. And I remember being 14 years old, freshman, and saying to myself, you're going to be an officer in the military one day. That's what you're going to be. And I was like, well, okay. And so I worked for that for 4 years. I was like, I'm going to get the ROTC scholarship and go to, you know, Citadel or Naval Academy, or, you know, I am going to go get this, you know. But my grades, I didn't learn to read until till I was in high school. I couldn't write worth a lick. My spelling was terrible.
You didn't read till you were in high school?
Not wholly.
Wow.
I could partially put things together, but yeah, I had a learning disability for a really long time.
Wow.
You know, that's from the abuse and the way I was on Hooked on Phonics. Gosh, I was on Hooked on Phonics for so long, I can't remember. I don't even know if that's I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but that was me. And, you know, I was a CD student, not because I was a bad student, but because I had legitimate learning disabilities. You know, I was great at history because I could remember things, but I was terrible at math or science. The only reason I had to take math and science twice so I could graduate. But my teachers at Needs High School and the principals and the vice principals and everyone and the guidance counselors all knew my story. They all knew I was a good kid. And so they allowed, you know, they gave me that extra tutoring, that extra help. So I passed the second time. I still only passed with a C. And that, you know, I was okay with that. So when I applied for the ROTC scholarship my senior year, of course I got rejected because my peers were 1,000 times beyond my learning capability. I mean, they were in IB, they were taking APA classes, they were 4.0s and higher. They were like the full package. And so when I got rejected, I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And, you know, I just was crushed, and I wanted to be in the military so bad, and it was like ripped from me. And then a few years ago, I just was talking with the Lord, and I just remember going, maybe it's time to do the military. Maybe it's time. It's very unique because most people have, by my age, they've either done their 4 years or 8 years and they're out. They're not starting. You don't see 28-year-olds at basic, right? So I did. I felt like I was called to. I felt like I was supposed to. And so I went to University of Florida, and I sat down with a colonel. I said, hey there, sir, this is my plan. I want to do the SMP program, the National Guard, but I'm only going to do it if you promise to contract me so I can become an officer. And I told him about my book, and I told him what I do for my civilian job. And I said, this is XYZ. So if you can handle everything that I come with, then I will gladly serve as an enlisted soldier and commission and serve the United States Army with pride. And he goes, too easy. So off I went. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, and I went to basic, went to AIT, a 74 Delta on the enlisted side, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear warfare specialist. And then I came back, and U.S. contracted me. I'm a non-scholarship contracted cadet, and I commissioned in 7 months. And you know, it's been a 15 years, 16 years ago, you know, I wrote down, and I'll send you it. I wrote down, I'm going to be an officer in the United States military, you know, when I was in high school. And I talk about that. You don't give up on your dreams. Don't quit. It may take you this way and this way and this way, and it might not look quote unquote normal, but really, what is normal? There is no such thing. It's the path that you have been given. And so I fully believe that I have been trained and equipped to be a leader of nations. and that this is my calling, and this is my duty, is to give back. And there's no other way for me to give back than to be a servant leader in and out of uniform. And so it's a privilege to me. It's an honor. And, I'm thrilled that the United States Army is supportive of me and allowing me the opportunity to serve and give back and lead. And yeah, I can't speak enough about our military and what we do for American citizens, and how we help our communities. And yeah, the military has saved me long before they even knew I existed. But they know now.
Yeah. It brings tears to my eyes, honestly. Thank you for serving in our military. I want to say that.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, thank you for serving. And your story is just so inspiring because you speak with a confidence you shouldn't have, Christina, but by the Lord.
Yeah, facts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things there's a lot of things. I should be dead. I should be in the ditch. I should be a prostitute. I should be addicted to all kinds of things. I should be an alcoholic. I should be bitter, mean. I should be vengeful. I should be narcissistic. I should be all of the things that the statistics tell foster care children that they're going to be. And not to mention the horrible things my mother told me I was going to be for years. And the Lord's graciousness, in my unbelievable determination and stubbornness, has gotten me to where I am. And I know God's not finished. There's a path for me, and an obligation and a mantle that I know that I have to walk out. And I'm ready. And the only reason I'm ready is because I have suffered. The only reason I'm capable of leading people is because I know what it's like to suffer immensely. And I think there's a credibility there. Like, look at Joseph. I always everyone, all the stories in the Bible, Joseph is my favorite because his family rejected him. That's what my family did. He knew there was a calling on his life, and his family ostracized him. I knew I was different. My family ostracized me. He was put in prison unlawfully, out of no reason. I was homeless and had all horrible things happen to me, not because I was bad and then what did the Lord do? He brought Joseph out of those traumatic, painful experiences, abandonment, rejection, isolation, and he brought him to the pinnacle of the Egyptian leadership. Like that, think about that in times now. That's essentially akin bringing me to the White House, which,
right.
Let's be honest, that's not far-fetched for a woman like me, on the path that I'm headed. Because I already know I'm going to run for office in a few years. But I think it's just the story of redemption and really believing when God tells you something. And then even when it's dark and it's raining and the rain is pounding on you so hard, it's almost leaving bruises on your body, you're still holding on to that word, and you're not going to let it go. And you're not going to let it go no matter what anyone says. And then it manifests. The Lord brings, nothing comes back void. Everything that the locust has eaten, he will give back. He makes all things new. He's the restorer. He's the vindicator. He is the forgiver. He is the lover. He is a God of war. He is jealous for us. He loves us. He wants all good things. And so, my Heavenly Father has placed in me his truth, and I won't let go no matter what the world tells me. I haven't, and I never will. So.
Amen. Amen, sister.
I got a little preachy there.
I love it. I love it.
Sorry.
No, it's so great, Christina. I love it. Well, so we always like to end our interviews on kind of a light note. And I love your story. I feel like we could just talk for so long, but unfortunately we have to start wrapping it up.
Okay.
But we thought it would be fun to just hear some things about your daily life now. And so we just asked 3 questions. And I don't know if your publicist gave you these, so I'm going to cut this out, but I want to prep you a little bit. It's what can you not live without right now? And these are just practicals that are not coffee and my Bible, because we all need those. And I'm going to ask you specifically what a favorite verse is that you've held on to in your life, if you have an answer to that one. And then maybe a favorite recipe or a favorite tradition, either one.
Let me go grab my Bible for that verse, but I've got all three of those.
Okay. Are you good
I
on
have
time?
people like breathing under my door right now.
I know.
I can hear my mom.
I couldn't tell if it was your kids or if she has a cat, because
I think she has a cat.
Okay,
because
I was like,
it wasn't me.
Could you hear him?
I was like, is there a cat somewhere? I just keep hearing a cat. No, it's fine, Christina. It's no big deal.
Can you mute the cat out? I'm so sorry.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure the cat thing out. Okay, you ready? Should we hop into some questions, or do you need a second?
Oh no, I'm ready.
Okay.
This is fun.
Yeah, this is the fun part. We like to end on kind of this light note. Okay, so Christina, tell us maybe what are a few things you can't live without right now?
Okay, so there's this product called Dermaware, and it has hyaluronic acid in it, and it's the most amazing face moisturizer of my life. And I have to wear it twice a day. It is amazing. And I'm 32, but can I tell you that I do not look 32?
So where do you get it?
It's the line is Dermaware, but I get it from this woman. She ships me all of I use a lot of Image products, Image skin line. They're amazing too. But I'll have to get back to you on the Dermaware. I'm not sure. Okay. I know the brand is Dermaware, but I'm not sure where you can get it from because I order it from somebody.
Okay.
But it's amazing. Like, oh my gosh.
And where do you live? Is it dry where you live?
So I live in Jacksonville, Florida, so it's very humid. But I travel so often, my body's always confused.
Yeah. Okay. What are some other things? Do you have a couple others you can't live without?
Oh yeah, I cannot live without my juicer. I drink celery juice every day, every single day. People are like,
what is it about celery juice?
Okay, so celery juice cleanses out your liver, and it helps with digestion, and it puts more stomach acid in your stomach so you can digest easier. It's full of vitamin C. I mean, people are like, kale's a superfood. I'm like, celery is a superfood, y'all. Like, get on the boat.
So you can't just eat it, because I eat a ton of celery, but I can't just eat it. I need to juice it because there's just not enough. No,
ma'am. You need to take that little organic bag, the 2 stalks that they give you, 2 big roots, and you need to juice those suckers and drink that thing down. Sometimes if I'm feeling like the last couple of days, I'm trying not to get sick, so I put 2 garlic cloves in there too, and I juice the garlic cloves and I juice my celery, and boom, boom, feeling like $1 million.
Wow. Okay. Got it. Love it. Okay. Yep. What about a favorite verse that has gotten you through some really hard times?
So I have so many verses that I go back to daily. But one of my favorites is, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9.
Yeah.
So I just cling to that because the Lord's put me in these situations where I'm with some of the most powerful men and women in the country. And then it's like me. And I'm like, okay, all right, Lord, I will just believe that you're with me. And he's faithful. So yeah, when you're in a stage full of when you're on stage and there's 10,000 people in front of you, the very first few times, it's very frightening. So I always remember the Lord is with me and he's going to give me the right words to say. And then I just do my thing. So
I love it.
This verse has definitely been good for me.
It's a verse I use all the time with my kids. I love that verse. Okay. And what about, so good. Okay. And what about a favorite tradition or a favorite meal you choose?
So traditions are hard because I still don't have family. I've never, right. I've been alone on Christmas and Thanksgiving for a really long time. So I don't really have any traditions other than hollering at Jesus every day. That's definitely a tradition.
No, right. And I mean that in the broad sense. Like, it doesn't have to be a holiday tradition. It's just like, it could be something that you do for yourself. But we can also skip that question if you don't want it.
No, it's fine. I work out a lot. I go to the gym a lot. That for me it's not only helped me with anxiety or frustration or depression, whatever, these things that we as humans get into sometimes, part of the human condition. the gym has always helped me and kept me fit. So I think that's definitely something that I do weekly. And I think I'm a sucker for binge watching TV. If I have time, I don't know if you've seen Outlander, but it's the most romantic TV show I've ever seen. And I am like, I want to be Sassenach.
I've heard other people say that. I have not watched it, but I've heard other people say that.
It is dreamy. It's beautiful. It's about this husband and wife, and it's the journey of this husband and wife who were madly in love with each other over decades and decades. It's like, I want that. It's beautiful. So I think when I'm allowed, because, I'm 21 hours in school right now. I'm full-time Army. I'm full-time book, of course, with HarperCollins and all kinds of other things, and my nonprofit. So if I get some time, I will just watch like 5 shows in a row and just completely disappear and pretend that I have zero responsibilities.
I love it. Okay, last question, a favorite recipe.
Favorite recipe. Okay, so I really love gluten-free chicken quesadillas.
Oh.
Oh man, they're so good. So you turn the frying pan on, you throw the gluten-free quesadilla on there. I've got dairy-free cheese, Daya, and I throw the cheese on there, and then I get the chicken, I throw the chicken on there, and I throw some beans on there, and then I throw the other gluten-free top on top, turn it a couple times for a few minutes, and then I squeeze lime juice all over it and put a little dairy-free sour cream, and boom, boom. Oh, delicious.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, Christina, this has been really fun, and we wish you all the best as you launch out there into the world and tell everybody about your memoir. It's amazing.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm really excited, and thank you for your time and just your care and your support. It means everything to me, really.
It's our joy.
We're cheering you on.
Yeah, Team
Christina. Yay, go Christina. Go girl. Go girl. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, yes ma'am. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.